Welcome back to the Daily Dean. Let me tell you about the story of this 1800s boxer, James Deaf Burke, who, when I first read about, the first thing I learned about him was his murdering of some other dude. Murder in quotation marks, which I'll get into later. Basically, James was born around, 1800s and lived from 1800 to 1850. He died when he was 38, 32, around that age, from tuberculosis. Spoiler alert, he died. But, point being, the first thing that you're probably going to read on, once again, when you skim his Wikipedia page, is how he murdered his opponent, Simon Byrne, the then Irish champion in bare knuckle boxing. Bare knuckle boxing is also, by the way, hecka intense. I'll tell you more about that later. But, basically, Byrne and Deaf Burke had this giant fight, and they were it was 3 hours long, 99 rounds, as the newspaper articles I've read in the British Newspaper Archive go. And Byrne eventually, succumbs to his injuries 3 days later and dies. And so James Burke is put on trial for the murder of Simon Byrne, and the referee and the umps and the other people involved are also tried for being accomplices in this second-degree murder. And so James Burke eventually gets exonerated for his crimes. And I was like, yo, wait, that's it? Where is more on that? So I looked more into it, and in my research, I found a newspaper article from that time. I don't remember which one. It doesn't let me read it anymore because it's expired, apparently, because I last researched this a year ago. So if I get some of the stuff and misinformation kind of blurred, that's my bad. But basically, it went... James Burke and Simon Byrne had a very, friendly meetup. It seemed like they were having a good time, smiling a lot. But Simon Byrne had injuries from another fight prior, or just in general. And so his injuries were exacerbated by James Burke, hauling his butt cheeks. And so, as a result, 3 days later, Simon Byrne totally died. So James Burke... And, this is my theory now. This is no longer about the newspapers. My theory is that he was exonerated because the circumstances arose. That's what exonerated means. He was, because of the circumstances of Simon Byrne's injuries and the whole fact he was still fighting even though he was hurt, doesn't mean that James Burke himself was actually responsible for his murder, because he was still injured from another fight prior. Simon Byrne, that is. So... that's the conclusion that I came to. If you want to read the newspapers, you have to create an account with the British Newspaper Archive in order to get more, read into it. But besides that, James Burke actually has to move away from England because his whole career is stigmatized and ruined, as he's the dude who murdered Simon Byrne despite being exonerated. So he goes off to America, and there he starts prize ring fighting. Prize ring fighting is the type of rule set that London used at the time, or is one of the rule sets that London used at the time. And basically what that means is James Burke brought prize ring fighting to America, which is kind of like if another kid from another school came to your school and taught you some new patty cake game, right, that you clap your hands to and play games. But instead of patty cake, it's beating the crap out of each other. So, basically, that, and then he moves back, and then he dies poor and of tuberculosis. So, his whole thing is being known for being one of the earliest heavyweight champions. That's a quote that you can find from the Britannica and Wikipedia pages. Because he's, again, in the 1800s. Dude goes in, the freaking boxing hall of fame because of how old he was. So I guess that's what you get for being one of the first people, right? But, talking about boxing, why is bare knuckle boxing, you may be wondering this, more intense, or sounds more intense, than regular professional glove boxing? Great question. I want you to think about a needle, or more think about poking a balloon. Okay, say a balloon is inflated, you poke it, nothing happens. You grab a needle, you poke it with the same amount of force, pops, right? Why? Well, it's because the same amount of force is applied to a smaller area. When that happens, the pressure is greater because, again, all that energy is applied to that little needle point. So, pops. Now, think about that with a punch. I punch your jaw off, right? Well, if, you imagine that this is the surface area of me punching your jaw, right? Well, imagine if that was larger. Well, suddenly the impact force is no longer as great, and you're not going to be hurting somebody like you're hitting a dump truck against them. So, that's why bare knuckle boxing is really intense and a lot more dangerous than using gloves. Because gloves also protect person's wrists, their knuckles, other stuff, because you could really break your freaking bones. Which is why you need that support, that cushioning, in order to extend the amount of time that you're actually in contact, and to widen out the surface area of your punch. So that's the physics lesson there. Now, I read also, this is from a while back, that bare knuckle boxing actually results in higher, like, acute injuries. Like, hey, you need to get to a hospital now, stop fooling around, stop fighting. While, glove boxing results in longer term injuries that are negligible, so then you keep fighting, resulting in longer term damage. So, bare knuckle boxing, really cool to think about. Like, there's photos you can find online of, like, dudes, like, people freaking fighting like that. But, that's basically it, and I hope you enjoyed the story of James Deaf Burke and some lessons on bare knuckle boxing. So, bye bye, and I hope you have a wonderful week.